So yet another dramatic development in the Chris Eubank Jr. Billy Joe Saunders saga. I did a video the other day about Eubank Jr. demanding 50,000 as a deposit to ensure he wasn't harmed ahead of the fight in terms of a brawl that could ensue at the press conference. Today was a sort of planned press conference, and Chris Eubank Jr. once again a no-show. Frank Warren, extremely critical of Chris Eubank Sr., says he's being awkward for the sake of being awkward, wanting that 50 grand deposit, and effectively refusing to turn up. I guess the difficulty here is Chris Eubank Jr., one would assume, would be obliged legally to turn up to the press conferences based on the contractual document he signed, whereas this 50 grand deposit is a new addition. You can't just throw that out as a demand after you've already signed a contract and agreed all the terms in the other sense. So I can understand why Frank Warren's pretty seething about it. Also, Frank Warren made another point. What happens if Eubank Jr. was to attack Billy Joe Saunders? What was Billy Joe just not allowed to defend himself? It causes all sorts of difficulties, and this sort of deposit, in addition to the claims that Eubank Sr. wanted the press conference in Brighton, is making for a very, very bizarre process. You would have to assume that Eubank Jr. will be attending the press conferences on fight week. You'd certainly have to assume, if he wants to take the fight, that he's going to have to weigh in, because that's going to be necessary in order to fight for Billy Joe's belt, in order for the fight to be a final eliminator, etc. So you have to assume there is going to be some contact with Billy Joe Saunders before the fight. It may be that, I've got two theories on this. Theory one is that Eubank Sr. is trying to keep his son away from Billy Joe Saunders because he's seen Billy Joe's IFL TV interview, he's seen how abusive Billy Joe is, and he just doesn't want any of that influence and energy surrounding his son before the fight, which is possible. I know there was talk today that Eubank Sr. allowed Steve Collins to get in his head before their fight, and he wants to make sure there isn't a repeat of that. The other theory is that, if Eubank Jr. had a press conference today and both sides had behaved well, would parties be talking about it? Would it be trending on Twitter? Would there be loads of YouTube videos going up about it? Perhaps him being a no-show yet again is actually creating more interest around the fight, more intrigue, more confusion, but all in a good way. So the cynical part of me thinks that this is only building towards a big fight. I do think there is a slight possibility that it is something to do with Chris Eubank Sr. playing mind games. He doesn't want to give Billy Joe the opportunity to get in Eubank's head. And also, I guess from Billy Joe's perspective, he downplayed it, but the guy flew a couple of hours. I'm not sure if that was at his expense or Frank Warren's expense, but it must be annoying when you're the reigning champion, European, Commonwealth, British, etc., to fly all that way to meet your challenger. And it's the challenger, the guy who's never even been in a 10-round fight, the guy who's never fought respectable opposition, who's, not turning up. You'd think it would be the other way around. It would be the champion who'd be too big. But, maybe that will get in Billy Joe's fight. Maybe that will mean Billy Joe, gets involved in a barroom brawl type fight as opposed to using his movement and his amateur background. So we shall see. Either way, the saga continues. I'm sure it won't be the last video I do about this ahead of the fight. Always interested to hear people's thoughts. Thanks very much for watching.